On this week's episode of 90 Degrees, we talk to a legendary bookmaker who's been in the industry for over 40 years, the creation of the 10-point teaser card, and having a family member who's renowned as one of the best sports bettors to ever live. That and more on today's episode of 90 Degrees. Welcome to 90 Degrees, where we take an inside look into the sports betting industry. I'm your host, G-Stack George, and I'm really excited because today I've got somebody that I've been looking up to for the last few years in my journey. Chris Andrews, the sportsbook director at South Point, author of 2 books. Chris, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. But 3 books, by the way.
Oh, I'm only familiar with 2. I'll ask you about the 2, and then you'll tell me which one I'm missing, okay?
Okay.
I wanted to ask you because I remember as a young kid, big family, Greek family, a lot of gambling, especially like New Year's. Everybody get together and they're playing poker and all the kids are there. So I got exposed to like the concept of gambling very young. What about for yourself? Like, what was your first exposure to the world of gambling and sports betting?
Well, I don't know if I could tell you my first because I just grew up with it. You know, it was never like one moment that dawned on me that this is what my uncle did for a living. You know, we just knew it. You know, I guess it's like how you learn to speak language. You know, it just kind of comes to you, and you know, so there was no one moment. There's no one moment that I didn't know that that's what he did. But you know, we learned a lot of lessons from him from early on, and you know, it's wound up. You know, giving me my life that I've lived, and you know, a great career, and I'm very happy for it.
So safe to say your uncle Jack Franzi, or Pittsburgh Jack, was the guy that kind of gave you the introduction. Tell us a little about him for those of us who aren't too familiar with Jack.
Well, Jack was always a gambler, not a bookmaker. He was a gambler. And like I said, from early on. And my Uncle Jack started, you know, probably like many of us did, betting, you know, 55 to 50 on games, and, you know, just kept winning. I should take that back because he was in high school. He actually did some booking. I wish I could remember the exact parameters of it, but he used to have like a thing every day with his high school buddies. I think it was pick 4 guys to have 5 hits. And, you know, and he said, all I had to do was look in a paper, and if Ted Williams went 0 for 4, you know, you could rip up the rest of the tickets. Nobody was going to win. So he did that like in high school. But as a serious bookmaker, he was really more of a gambler all his life until he came to Vegas. Then he became a consultant for Michael Gaughan at his various properties. But Jack got indicted in 1970 for interstate gambling and bookmaking and all sorts of things. But he even said himself at that time, he says, you know, if they'd have just accused me of what I was actually doing, he says, they'd have got me. He said, but they had a whole myriad of things that he wasn't doing. And what happened, just go into it very briefly, they tapped our phones at our house for 18 months. Now I'm 14 years old. You imagine having your parents read your transcripts of everything you're saying, you know. So they tapped our phones for 18 months. But and I'm not sure how the law reads today. I think it's pretty similar. But you have to go back and get it reauthorized by the judge every couple of weeks. Well, they had like the first couple of weeks, and then they never bothered to get it reauthorized. They just kept doing it. So when the trial came up, they threw all that out, and that was pretty much their whole case, was the wiretapping. And the judge threw it out. He says, this is illegal. You aren't allowed to do that. And so that was in 1970 back in Pittsburgh. And Jack decided then to come to Las Vegas where he could do his thing legally. And, you know, he stayed there and, you know, one by one. And for people that don't know, Pittsburgh, I graduated college in 1978. Pittsburgh was in the throes of a terrible depression when the steel industry dried up. And Jack, you know, established himself out here in Las Vegas, and one by one, the family moved out there. This wasn't much for us in Pittsburgh at that time. And I was, you know, 22, 23 years old. So it was kind of it actually wasn't an easy decision. I hated leaving Pittsburgh. I loved Pittsburgh. But, you know, as a college graduate, there wasn't much for me out back there. And, you know, I think I made the right move here. My career's been pretty good. I've had a good life.
Sure. You tell a great story about during the tapping of an FBI agent that was doing a little bit of side work as well while tapping the phone. So can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, this was so this is 1970 when his phones got tapped. So this is about, I want to say, about 1995. I was with my Uncle Jack and his son Zach, and we were in a restaurant in Las Vegas, and a guy came up and he said, "Excuse me, are you Jack Franzi?" And yeah, and he introduced himself, and he was a lawyer. He says, "My first job out of law school, I was listening in on your phone calls and doing the transcripts for the FBI." And as soon as I got off work, I went out and bet the same games you were betting, and it was the two best football seasons I ever had. So we all got a good laugh out of that. And, it was one of those deals where, I mean, he was probably what, 25, 26, just getting out of law school. He needed a job; that was his job. But he also was a gambler at heart, and was going out and betting those games himself. And well, if you followed my Uncle Jack, believe me, you could do a lot worse. He had a lot of really good football seasons and other seasons too.
Sure. So he does really well in Vegas. He kind of reinvents himself. That's leading to an entry into the Sports Gambling Hall of Fame at BetBash. Am I correct about that?
Yes, that is correct. He's going to be in that first group that's being inducted. I think there's the way Spanky's doing it. It's 5 living and 5 that have passed away, and he's obviously in the group that have passed away. But yeah, I'm going to introduce him, and his son Zach will will do the actual acceptance of the award.
And I heard that you said it's a family business. Everyone followed Uncle Jack out there. You also have a cousin who's in the business, and the two of you started before you even got to Vegas. Is that correct?
Well, there's 3 of us actually. My cousin Art Manteris ran. He was at Caesars. He was at the Hilton when they built the Superbook. And then my cousin Zach, who's Jack's son. Zach's been on the other end of the counter for most of his career, but now he's a bookmaker himself. He's working out of Mesquite. So there's 3 of us, and you know how these Greek families are, George. There was I'm born all in the same year. I'm born in April. He's born. Arthur's born in June, and Zach's born in August. All the same year. So we grew up always. Went to the same grade schools, went to church together. We lived together for a while. I mean, it was all of us. So we've all been in. Excuse me. We've all been in the business virtually our whole lives.
Sure. My grandmother on my mother's side had 17 kids. So I have like 30 cousins in Toronto alone, and like they're my brothers, right? The word cousin is just a tag. You're wearing a Pittsburgh Steelers shirt, and
I figured I'd wear my colors today for you, George. What
you're
the heck?
born and raised, and I didn't do this on purpose. All the episodes I've had Kurt Angle sitting on my bookshelf behind me, who's a Pittsburgh legend. But the guy I want to talk about is the guy right behind me. I'm a Miami Dolphin fan. And we were lucky enough that the pride of Pittsburgh fell to us in the draft. I have to ask you a question. You're a Pittsburgh born and raised. Were you crushed when the Steelers passed on Dan Marino, the hometown kid?
You know, I I was, but you have to remember there's a lot of things going on with Marino in that final year. A lot of rumors about him snorting cocaine wound up not being true. I think the team around him kind of fell apart. I mean, if you go back and look, Todd Blackledge actually had a better senior year and was drafted ahead of him. And Todd's had a great career as an announcer, but he wasn't. He'd be the first to tell you he wasn't a great NFL quarterback. So that year of 1983, we had that targeted. I'm a lot older than you, George. We had that targeted for about 3-4 years. That was going to be like one of the greatest drafts of all time. But you have to remember, at that point in time, Terry Bradshaw was fairly young, and it was that year, or the year after, when he really developed that elbow problem. So most of us were not quite that disappointed that Danny did not fall to us. But I mean, I think that's why we selected the Steelers
Yeah,
selected Pickett
yeah.
this last season. They don't want to blow it with that Pitt kid again, and So I mean, I'm not crazy about Pickett, but I also think he might be pretty good. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to wear my Steeler colors regardless, but I hope Pickett makes it. And it's sad that we didn't get Marino, but I can't say that at the time I felt that way. That would be disingenuous on my part.
Got it. So you still have Pittsburgh in your heart, but you've been in Vegas for a while. When do you head out to Vegas, join Uncle Jack and the family? Do you remember what year it was?
Oh yeah, it was 1979. It was April of 1979. Um, I had, like I said, I had some different opportunities in Pittsburgh, but none were that great, and nothing like what awaited for me in Las Vegas. So, I was a bartender at the time, and I had some guys, and I'm actually working on another book right now, and I'll tell a little bit about that story. How there were some guys that really wanted me to hang around, and they saw that maybe I had some management potential. So I had some opportunities, but I'm not sure I wanted to be in that bar life for the rest of my life. I like the gambling side of it, much better.
Your first job in the sports betting industry officially in Vegas, you were a ticket writer at the Stardust, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
And okay, so I was in media once upon a time, and I was told that I missed the golden generation of media. The same way, like pilots today may not know how good it was to be a pilot in the 70s, right? Stardust, is infamous because of the movie Casino and Frank Rosenthal, the guy Robert De Niro played, who's actually also joining your Uncle Jack in that first in class into the Gambling Hall of Fame. Did you have any overlap with that era, or were you coming in right after that era had finished?
Was right after that era, but let me tell this story first, and then there is some overlap. And I have a story. If you read my first book, Lefty Rosenthal and Michael Jack, they hated each other. So there's no way I was getting in there while Lefty was still one of the main guys in charge. But kind of after Lefty got thrown out, and his two guys were Marty Kane and Joey Boston. They ran the sports book. They all got tossed out. The state, forced them out of there. So that I would not go. Jack wouldn't put me in while those guys are around. However, a couple years later, my boss at the time, Warren Nelson, who was one of the owners of Calneva, he had a big piece of the Boyd Group. So when the state really came down and just tossed every one of those guys out, um, the Boyd Group was selected to come in and run the Stardust at that point. So Warren had me go in as like a consultant to go and just analyze the sports book and see, make heads or tails of it. So I have a couple stories about that in my book, but I can tell you this: all the stuff they pretty much said was true. I mean, there's just the thievery out of there was incredible, and I saw some of it when I was writing tickets there. I mean, I kind of didn't understand fully what was going on, but later on, and it was only a few years later when I was back in there as as an executive consultant, that I got to see some of this stuff firsthand. And I mean, it was incredible what they were doing. But that's the way old Las Vegas was. At least that's the last vestige of the way it had been at that time.
Sure. And I want to put a pin in that because I want to talk about how Vegas and the industry and the city has changed. Shortly after that, you go and this is the first time you're working with Jimmy Vaccaro, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But you had known him earlier than in that, or was that the
Oh
first
yeah.
time you met him?
Oh no. I knew him. Well, again, my Uncle Jack, being in Pittsburgh, Jack was just one of those guys where, he knew all the important people, and through him, I got to know Sonny Vaccaro, and Sonny Vaccaro, they've made movies about him, and he's world famous. I got to know Sonny when I was very young, probably 10, 12 years old, something like that. And Sonny had the Round Ball Classic, and I was one of the ball boys there. And, so I got to know Sonny, and but then we got to know his brother. By the way, back in Pittsburgh, nobody calls him Jimmy. He's Chauncey Vaccaro.
no,
So we got to meet Chauncey. Got to know him. But I got to know him much better out in Las Vegas. And I always used to joke with him. When he got to Las Vegas, all of a sudden he was more professional and he became Jimmy. But back in Pittsburgh, everybody calls him Chauncey. Very very few people have ever called him Jimmy back home.
sure. It sounds like you guys have known each other for so long, and the roots go deep. Chris, you have 5 children of your own. Did any of them ever have the itch to get in this business, or did you want to purposely keep them away from this business?
No, I didn't purposely keep them away. By the way, none of them are in this business, and and it's funny how it works sometimes, George. Only one of them is really a big sports fan, and that's my daughter. The boys, I mean, they know a little bit of what's good, but my one son, I mean, he might not know. I mean, and he lives in Seattle right now. I mean, so he knows the Mariners, he knows the Seahawks. But if I asked him, like, what city do the Colts play in, there's no chance he would have any idea, But the others have a little bit of an idea. My one daughter, she's millennial. She calls it sports ball, like a lot of those kids do, But my one daughter, she's a big fan, and her and I have. We sweated both, a couple of Stanley Cups together. We've sweated football games together, even baseball. So, her and I share that. But I love all my kids, but none of them are sports fans except for my daughter, and none of them really wanted to get in the business. But I did not shield them from it. We used to go to the bar. My one friend in Reno owned the bar, Bullies. And we'd go every Monday night, and I'd say, "Okay, you get a free $10. Here's what we're rooting for," And it was always the dog, and it was always the under. And finally, one of the kids says, Dad, everybody in the bar is rooting against us. Well, I said, "Well, welcome to the life of a bookmaker. That's the way life is for
Yeah,
us."
yeah. We like low scoring games where the favorites don't win. That's
Exactly.
our speed. You also became like the youngest sports book director at 25 years old in Vegas. I just want to talk about were you ready for at the time? I know everybody when they're applying for the job, yeah, I'm ready, I can do it, I can handle it. Were you ready at 25 years old for that role?
Well, I was definitely ready for the bookmaking aspect of it. I wasn't so much ready for like the people part of it. There's a lot of managing people, and I was not really prepared for that. But you have to remember, George, I was 14 years old when my Uncle Jack moved to Las Vegas, and my dad passed away that same year. So I look back now, I give my Uncle Jack so much credit because he was being a father to me as well as running his business in Las Vegas. He was flying back and forth from Vegas to Pittsburgh. I really can't even, it just seemed like normal to me. So I wasn't really thinking that much about it. But he was also flying me out to Las Vegas. Me and my cousin Zach, he flew us out there many times. I was 14 years old, and he would bring me to lunch with him. And I was smart enough to just keep my mouth shut and listen. I was having lunch with, besides my Uncle Jack, Bob Martin, Jackie Gone, some other names that people may not know, like Bob Black, um, Joe Snyder, Bobby Barrett. I mean, these guys were giants of the industry, and what they were doing was very much kind of like under the covers a little bit. So a lot of people don't know them, but believe me when I tell you, I learned so much from them that I've said it. There's no way an Ivy League education could prepare you for life as well as my experience prepared me for my life. Just by, like I said, just keeping my mouth shut. I ask an occasional question or two, but mostly just listening to these guys and learning as much about the business as I could. So when I was 25, yeah, I was ready for the bookmaking part. The people part, I'm still trying to figure out sometimes,
Sure.
to tell you the truth.
Hey, I want to talk to you about Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sports book and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what professional bettors have known for decades. Pinnacle is where the best bettors play. Must be 19 plus in Ontario, not available in the US. Please play responsibly. Now back to the show. That story reminded me of like one of my favorite quotes where they say if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. And
Yeah.
the idea of just if you're around some talented people who have a wealth of experience, just quiet down, absorb it, take it in, and learn what's being said. Because, like you said, they could teach you 2 years of classes in university, and you'll never pick up what you get in that 1 hour conversation in that room.
Yeah, I mean, it was a remarkable experience for me, and and even my cousin and I said during our lives, as we decided to get into this business, we always said, if we don't make it in this business, we have no one to blame but ourselves because we had the best education possible, and and here we are, we're 67 years old. We've, I think we've all been fairly successful, so we don't have anybody to blame. We all did okay.
I think one of the more underrated aspects of being like anyone in management is having like an eye for talent and understanding when you have someone special in front of you. I say that because Roxy Roxborough, who is also going into that first class, has been
Yeah.
like called one of the most important, odds makers of all time. And you discovered Roxy very young in his career.
Yeah. Uh, I tell the story, and what happened is when I first went to Calneva, and people don't realize how much the business has changed. But at that time, this baseball totals was like this new thing. So this was 1981. I go up to Calneva, and I really didn't know much about totals at all, and I was getting them from my Uncle Jack, but he didn't know either. He was very old school. They bet sides and, some things like that, but totals was like this brand new thing. So every day I'd get the totals, 7.5, 8, 8.5. I mean, no juice attached either way. It was just everything was 11-10 at the time. So Roxy was killing me. And but I liked him. I mean, he was friends. I mean, he wasn't screwing me or anything. He was making his bets and winning. What are you going to do? So anyway, he was a Vegas guy, but he loved Reno. He'd go to Reno quite a bit. And anyway, so we talked and we had drinks and dinner occasionally. And then he told me, "Hey, listen, thanks a lot for everything, and I'm going back to Las Vegas tomorrow." I said, "Well, listen, since you're leaving, uh, how about you calling me every day and give me the right totals?" He says, "Yeah, I could do it. What do you think it's worth?" I said, "I have no idea. I don't know. How's 200 a week sound?" It's pretty cheap. He says, "Yeah, okay. What the hell?" Because like I said, we had a good relationship as friends. And he started calling me the next day, and before you know it, he turned that into a business. And God bless him, he became extremely influential in this business and has turned himself into a multimillionaire. And God bless him. But he used to sleep on my couch. He didn't have the money to get a room. But and every day when he'd bet me, when I said, "Just tell me when you're done,
Yeah.
where my numbers
Let me
should
know when
be."
the line is right where it needs
Yeah,
to.
let me know. And like I said, and I've tried to be that way with wise guys my whole life. I mean, there's a lot. You can't know everything in this business. You just can't. So I mean, there's certain guys you try to learn from, and he was one of them. I learned from him, but I think I did right by him as well. Like I said, I gave him that start that he turned into a multi-million-dollar business.
Absolutely. Well, you talked about like not knowing totals and how back in the day, like the betting menu must have been very thin when you
Hmm.
start off in your career. It's like pick the side you like and maybe we have a total and it's a new
Yeah.
concept. The menu's obviously grown now and there's everything runs in the first inning in baseball, incremental quarters, periods, like you can bet all kinds of stuff, but you actually have played a role in expanding the betting menu for people. You created the pleaser and then the 10-point teaser cards. That was one of your brainchilds.
The 10-point teaser is 100% me. I created the odds for that, and I went through and I charted about 2 or 3 years worth of results, college and pro. Came up with the numbers. Roxy used to joke with me. He goes, "What'd you do? Smoke a joint and go into?" I said, "Well, maybe." That was a long time ago, but I really did chart all that. The pleaser was actually invented by a friend of mine. uh, I don't want to use his name. He's very private and he's out of the business right now. But he's a good friend of mine. Now he was just doing it. He was calling it the pleaser when it was like a reverse teaser. And he's using it, and I was beating him on it. And I would, back in the day, like I said, this would be the early '80s and stuff. Oklahoma football. I'm talking about. They might win 56-0.
Yeah.
And the line was like 42. Well, I'd lay 48. You know what I mean, and get plus 220 or whatever for my money. And I was same thing in basketball. I remember some of the teams like I think Louisville was back when Denny Crum was a coach. Like they might have been a 17-point favorite, but then you'd have to lay 21 and get 2-1 for and I mean I was doing really so anyway. He wound up getting out of the bookmaking business, but I talked to him about it, and he's a math genius, literally a genius. And a lot of people in Las Vegas know who he is. He wound up winning so much money that he got out of the business, mostly betting basketball. But I asked him, I said, I want to create this card. Can you help me do it? He says, yeah, sure. And he was like I said, and this is God's honest truth. The next day, he came with like a 23-page written report, like spiral bound and everything. I mean, he must have been up all night doing this. And how could I? He goes, don't worry about paying me back. He says, just buy me dinner occasionally. It's okay. That's, sounds fair to me. But
Yeah,
since then, yeah. So, I mean, he invented like the bet itself, but I'm the one that made it into a parlay card.
sure.
And it's made me quite a bit of money over the years, a lot of money. And, that's the genesis of that.
I think of I'm not sure if you've seen the movie The Big Short where about the housing market, right? There's the opening scene where they're explaining the bankers are coming up with this new market about how they're going to make money and I remember the one scene where the guy goes, it's a whole new way to make money, right? And I'm guessing in the sports betting industry, when you create a market that catches fire and the recreational bettors love it and it's a huge revenue driver, it's like, all right, we did pretty good with that one.
Yeah, my first year that I got it going, and I was pretty high paid at the time, and I showed my bosses at the end of the year. I said, "See this? This was the pleaser card. You see this?
Mm-hmm.
This paid my entire salary. I
Love it.
invented it. This paid my salary. So pretty much I'm working for free for you guys,
Yeah.
but I can't complain about Calney, but they took care of me pretty good. So, but I made sure they knew that one.
I want to talk about where you are now. Like you've like I don't you've had such a long, extensive career, and you've worked at Golden Nugget and William Hill, and I rather than get into every single place you've been, you're at the South Point now since 2016. How did you get in there? Did somebody approach you, say, "Hey, Chris, we really want you here at the South Point"? Because there's a lot of legendary, talent working on your side of the counter at the South Point right now.
Yeah, there is. Well, I knew Michael Gaughan when I worked for Jimmy Vaccaro back in 1980. I knew Michael Gaughan, and he and my uncle Jack were very good friends. And Michael and I always had a very good relationship, even though I wasn't working for him. And I always used to joke with everybody. I said, "Well, I have one billionaire who actually will return my calls or take the call when I call him." That was Michael Gaughan. And I'd see him when I'd come in, and he'd always, come on over, have dinner, and I'd go visit. When I was living in Reno, my mother was very sick. She was living in Las Vegas, and I'd fly down. I don't know, once, twice, three times a month, just to see her. And they put me up at the at whatever hotel Michael was at, full RF&B. You know what I mean? And I wasn't gambling. I was just coming down to see my mother and that sort of thing. So we always had a very, very good relationship. And my predecessor, Bert Osborne, he had some issues. I don't want to go into them right now. Some health issues. I mean, that's his business. But he wound up leaving. But he's already told Michael that if he were to leave, that I would be the best guy to take his place. So Michael called me one day, and I was in Reno, and I had my own business at the time, and we finally got it. I was just me and my wife. We finally got it up to where okay, I could make a decent living doing this. And Michael calls me, he says, listen, I'd like you to come down and run the sports book, but I says, oh, Michael, I said, geez, I'm in Reno. I finally, he says, I'd like you to start like tomorrow. I said, well, I got a lot of stuff to do. I says, Michael, let me talk to my wife. He says, well, you got 24 hours, make a decision. I said, okay. So anyway, my wife at the time was sleeping on the couch, and she got up. She says, "What was that? Michael gone?" I said, "Yeah." And I explained to her, what the offer was and everything. She goes, "Are you crazy? Of course you have to take it." So, okay. So I called Michael gone. I said, "Well, that didn't take 24 hours. It took more like 5 minutes." But yeah, my wife's on board. So he goes, "Okay, I'm starting you on the payroll today. Can you? This was like a Tuesday, I think. I said, can you be here Monday?" Or he says, "Can you be here tomorrow?" I said, "Michael, you got to give me a week." I said, I got a lot of things to take care of. He says, "Okay, I'll put you up in the hotel. You can stay here." And, you know, wound up, well, I was there a week later, and, the rest is history. It's worked out really well for me.
It's in your blood, right? It's the whole just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in, right?
Yeah, well, I was in the business. We had a company called Against the Number. And, I but I was doing well with it, but it wasn't exact because I was selling picks and we had some other stuffs going on. I really didn't like doing that. I always felt that was like a dirty business, although I did really good for my customers. I had a couple hundred customers, and only one out of all those, ever really complained and didn't renew his subscription. So, I think I did really well for my customers. I always tried to be have a lot of integrity and that sort of thing, and I did. But I wanted to transfer the company. I knew eventually that it was gonna. I was trying to transform it into a media company more than anything else, which I was in the process of doing. And like I said, making good money at the time, but not the money Michael was paying me, and all the benefits and all that went along with it. So it was an easy decision at that point.
So you're back with Jimmy Vaccaro. You guys are working shoulder to shoulder. You started your career. Is he the guy you spent the most time in this business working with?
Well, the guy I spent the most time with was my Uncle Jack. We talked, numerous times every day.
Yeah,
So it wasn't always face to face, but it was constantly on the phone for many, many years. So probably Jack number one, Jimmy, and then Roxy Roxborough too.
sure.
Those three I would say are the ones that I've spent the most time with in this business. But I have so many friends, and like just last night I was out to dinner with my cousin Art, Vinny Maiolo, Richie Baccelleri, Vic Salerno, and Sue Snyder, who runs the Hall of Fame that
Yeah.
they put me in last year. And so that's always been my life. And I told my wife, I loved Reno. I loved Reno. I think overall there's a lot more to do in Reno, but all my friends have always been in Vegas, and even my kids growing up, you're a Vegas guy, Dad. You're a Vegas guy, and they're right. I am a Vegas guy, because that's my people down here. I always joke that all my friends are Jews, Greeks, or Italians, and that's my life. That's what we do.
The easiest way to improve as a sports bettor is use multiple sports books and always get the best odds. We recommend using an odds comparison tool like BetStamp. BetStamp compares odds across every sportsbook for games, futures, and player props. Save time and money by checking BetStamp before you bet. Download the app today. If you're looking to sign up for a new sportsbook account, please check out the offers available at betstamp.app/circles off or hit the link in the description. If you sign up through this page, it helps support the show. Now back to the rest of the episode. You mentioned going in the Hall of Fame last year. There's this thing in the wrestling world where guys get into the Wrestling Hall of Fame and they always say, you know what? I don't care if I ever go in. I'm happy I made a living in this business. This business treated me good. And then they get the call and it's an honor. And, they say, I didn't realize how big of an honor it was until I'm being celebrated in front of my peers. Was it the same for you? Because this is often, there is no, we don't play for a championship ring at the end of the year. We're in the sports world, but we're not celebrated as Super Bowl champions at the end of the year. Was that a big honor for you when you got the call?
It was a huge honor for me, and I can't say I didn't want to go in. My cousin Art, man, Terrace got in the year before me or 2 years before me, so of course I wanted to be in.
Sure, exactly.
You think
Can't let him have the one up on you.
Yeah, I mean, you think I wanted to go to these family functions where he says, "Hey, I'm in the Hall of Fame." Well, I says, "I didn't make it," But
Yeah.
now I can say, "Yeah, I'm in there too." So yeah, I definitely wanted in, and guys like Roxy's in, and Vic's in, and these are my friends, been my friends, all my life. Jimmy's in, Vinny got in the same year I did, so yeah, I wanted in. I make no bones about it. I was very proud to be selected, and it is a great honor.
Every time it's brought up, who's the greatest sports bettor of all time? The answer is always Billy Walters.
Yeah.
I want a name and it doesn't have to be a name of somebody that wasn't Billy Walters, that was the best bettor that you've ever booked or that you ever got to know.
Well, the other one I would say would be Jack Franzi. That's the other one who I would say, but that's kind of like that's an easy one. Well, there's a lot of other ones I would put in that category. Some of the ones I mentioned, Bob Blackie, he was known as, Bobby Brent, who I used to call Uncle Bobby. He was another great one that the one kid who helped me with the pleaser card. Like I said, I'm not going to say his name,
Yeah.
but he may have been the other one. I mean, he really revolutionized mostly NBA betting. He's probably the best that I know, and even those one kid who's passed away from us now. Shep was his name, Louisiana kid, and he'd say the guy's name. He goes, "That's the best there ever was," And I said, "Yeah, he started out in Reno." And then his phone accounts got popular and legal and everything. He was betting all the guys in Vegas, and they'd call me, "Do you know this kid?" I says, "Yeah, it's about time he's kicking your ass a little bit. I got tired of him kicking my ass all these years." But he was one of those guys. Like if he, you usually you get a bet, you move it half a point. You get a bet, he'd make me a bet, I'd move it a point and a half. And then I tried to go in with his sides whenever I could. And like I said, we had a very, very good relationship. And like I said, I've always tried to keep a good relationship with the wise guys because, there's a lot you can learn off them. And listen, if you're a smart bookmaker, you try to go in with the same sides. You can't always do that, but I
Yeah.
try to go in with the same sides as them, whenever I can.
Well, you talk about like the mentality of not banning sharp bettors and using their information to your advantage. Why do you think so few books want to take that approach? And it's astronomically the other way, where they say boot the sharps and keep all the recreational bettors. Do you think they're missing an opportunity to learn from these guys?
Well, George, I used to say, in corporate America, probably corporate Canada too, and England, now that I'm thinking about it, because I work with some of those guys too, they preach the gospel of mediocrity. And that's, it's hard to be great. And I'm not saying I'm great. I mean, I try to be. I tried. I believe me, I've failed as much as anybody in this business. But I try to not be mediocre. I try to be the best. And sometimes, oftentimes I've not been able to do that. Oftentimes, believe me, there's a lot of people will tell you that. But I try. And part of that is learning from some of these guys. But it's easy to just toss all those guys and just book the recreational guys. And you know what? You'll probably do okay, but that's not the way I want to live my life. And that's not my mantra. That's not how, this, Bob Martin told me one time, he says, he wants to take a big bite out of life. That was Bob's quote. Was, "I want to take a big bite out of life." And I always remembered that. And I said, you know what? That's the way to be. It's easy to be a C or a C plus. That's easy. I try to be an A. I'm proud. Believe me when I tell you, if you're comparing me to Bob Martin or Billy Walters, I'm definitely not an A, but I'm probably a B. And I just was never content to be a C. I always wanted to do a little bit better than that. So, like I said, if you talk to most corporate guys, you know, whether it's in bookmaking business or whatever they're doing, what's their goal? You know what their goal is? To have a job tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I want to be. I want to excel at whatever I do.
I love that. It's the saying, "Good enough is not good enough," right? Like
No,
challenge,
yeah,
challenge yourself.
if you're in college, C's get degrees. Yeah, okay, they do. You know what? I'd rather get an A.
Yeah. I like to excel. If I'm going to do something, I want to do it right and I want to be really good at it. You talk about bookmaking and the idea of sometimes like you can't end up on the same side as the sharps. Sometimes there are games where the sharps and the public all loves the same side. Like I think of the New England Patriots Super Bowl against the Rams, and like the books just got caught. Like everybody's loaded up on New England. How often does that happen where you're just like, oh God, we are in for some trouble here?
Oh, believe me, there's days when especially Saturdays and Sundays, I'll just look at whoever I'm with and say, "We ain't getting out of this one, boys. This is going to be a bad one." And it happens. But George, I've been saying for years, don't cry for the bookmaker. We're going to be okay at the
Yeah,
end of the year.
the
We're gonna,
lights will
we're
still
gonna,
be on tomorrow.
yeah. Well, and that was another Bob Martin statement. He used to tell me, he says, some days it just comes out like that. He says, you know what? I'm going to have the same breakfast in the morning. It's okay. It's a great way to look at it. I'm going to have my Honey Nut Cheerios no matter what. So, that's just the way it goes sometimes.
I want to talk about South Point has something kind of unique to them where you guys like to keep diamond lines. That's it. You don't believe in juicing it one way or another. And obviously, when you're floating between a 6.5 and a 7, you can always take a bet on either side, but it gets a little tricky on the 3 just because of how crucial that number is. Um, you guys often have the best line on games that are line 3 because of that. What's the mentality around not juicing one side over the other?
Well, Michael Gaughan, his longtime partner is Frank Toady. And Frank and I are maybe cut from the same thread. Frank loves fine dining. He loves betting horses, and he loves fishing. And those are some of my passions in life.
Yeah.
So Frank and I have had a great relationship. Matter of fact, I have in the book that I'm writing, because Michael gets a lot of accolades, which he deserves. But Frank, not too many people talk about Frank. Frank stays hidden a little bit. But I have a chapter in my upcoming book about Frank. He's been such a great friend of mine and an influence. Frank's a very street smart guy and has a great feel for this business. Frank is the one that says, listen, for years and years, bookmakers have done fine booking everything at 11 to 10. That's the way we're going to do it at the South Point. I don't want numbers juiced. We're going to do everything at 11 to 10. And at some point, it kind of takes the pressure off you, because if a game falls 3 and we get murdered, what am I going to? Well, hey, that's the way we want to do it. And I think it really, listen. Of course, we've gotten caught a couple times. Of course, you know how many games fall 3, but in the long run, it has definitely been highly beneficial for us, because the public, they listen. If they know they're laying 11 to 10, that's what they're going to lay. It's not going to be 3 minus a quarter or 3.5 plus 0.5. Whatever. They know what they're going to lay, and that, like I said, overall, that's been highly beneficial for us. And even when I was at Calneva all those years, I did it the exact same way. I didn't juice 3s or 7s. I didn't juice anything. We used everything at 11 to 10.
Sure. I talk about like level of standards, right? Where people walk in and they expect a certain thing. So you say they walk in, they know to expect 11 to 10. There's a famous thing about Costco where they say, hey, our chickens will always be $4.99, and they even invested into like a chicken farm in order to reduce the cost so that they can keep it at $4.99. South Point does the same with your hot dog cart. You say this is $1.50, and you're eating a hot dog at the South Point, right? It's just when you create that level of comfort where somebody walks in and they know exactly what they're getting, and it's suddenly not a change. It creates a little bit of a relaxed attitude and say, all right, this is the level of standard I am accustomed to.
Well, yeah, and you go in anytime there's that line at the hot dog cart. Whenever it's up. Remember at Roxy, Roxborough, who's a vegetarian. He came in one day and he says there was no line at the hot dog cart. He says, I almost broke 40 years of vegetarianism just to have a hot dog because nobody was in line. I said, well, that's a very rare occurrence. And George, I'm not the most slim and trim guy in the world. I try to keep it to about 2 hot dogs a week, so, but it's a great thing. And really, we appeal to the common guy.
Yeah.
That's a Michael Gaughan thing. And he probably got that from his dad, Jackie Gaughan. But it works really well for us, is all I can tell you.
It reminds me of like going to a barber shop and they still do the hot cream and the shave and the hot towel.
Yeah.
You need that, right? So like the world has gone into this, how can we save money and lower service as much as we can? And I'm like, the ones that appreciate that level of customer service still stand out above everybody else.
Yeah, I mean that's one thing we pride ourselves in is customer service. You come in on Saturday and Sunday during football season, we have 12 ticket writers and 11 kiosks. So I always tell guys, if you didn't get your bet in, it's your own fault. We try to service customers as best as we can, and I think we do a pretty good job of that.
I want to talk about the growth of this industry because once upon a time, Vegas was the show. You wanted to get your sports betting in legally, you had to go to Vegas. The laws have changed and it's become legal in several states, which to me, I was always curious on how Vegas would respond. How do you think Vegas has fought back against like this increase in competition now, where you go from being the only show in town to now there's multiple states with different sports books?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely affected us. We've had some of our big players have uh, played a lot in some neighboring states, Utah. Or I'm sorry, not Utah, Arizona, and Colorado. That some guys have actually moved there, or they do a lot of their betting out of those states. There's certain bonuses that some of these outfits give them. We don't do that at South Point. I think some of the places do with the mobile app. Again, I've had beefs with a lot of the wise guys. Well, you don't take much on the mobile app. I said, listen, this is the way Michael Gaughan wants to run the business. He has a bricks and mortar casino. We're a sports book that's part of a casino. I know other places that are sports books. They're not part of a casino, or they're a sports book with a casino. You know what I mean? So that's not. And I remember the one guy complained to me. He says, "Well, I'm not going to do that." I says, "Well, you got to remember, Michael Gaughan has a buffet. We're the only, you know, 7 days a week buffet in town. We have a buffet. We have the $1.50 hot dogs. We sell beer for $2. We have 11 restaurants, everything from the deli to Michael's Gourmet Room, which is probably one of the most expensive places in town. I says we have all that. That's what Michael wants to do. The guy says, "Well, I'm not going to do any of that stuff anyway." I says, "Well, you just made my point." So you just made my point. Michael Gaughan didn't build this whole $1 billion operation so you could sit on your couch and bet. He wants you to come in here. And if you don't want to come in, then that's fine. We certainly have that. You have that option, but this is what Michael Gaughan wants. So these are the things that we do better in Las Vegas than anyone else does. But to think that it's not going to affect our handle, that'd be foolish on our part. Our handle's been pretty good. It's probably fallen off a little bit, but the regular customer, we have not lost much of that. Some of the wise guys are coming in, and we still put them on. We take a decent sized bet. We take 10,000 in baseball, and we'll take 30,000 in the NFL. So I mean, it's not like we take small bets. We don't, but we are going to see some of those wise guys going some other places. And, listen, I don't want to lose their business. I really don't. But it's not like that's, at best you're going to hold 1% on those guys, so that's not going to affect my bottom line all that much. We keep doing what we can. And we get visitors. I got a guy, he just texted me last night. He says, "Hey, man, I'm going to be in Vegas." He comes in from LA. Fortunately, California hasn't legalized betting it, so we still get a lot of LA guys coming up here. I think we're holding our own, but I think we'd be foolish to say that it's not going to affect us at all, because it has and it will in the future.
I think of Vegas as, this pull city, reasons to come in, right? All right.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can sports bet in several places now, but Vegas has always been the idea of having shows, and now they got sports teams coming, right? They got the Athletics are on their way, and the Las Vegas Golden Knights. The NBA wants to expand there. Formula One's going to be racing on the Strip next year. They have this big giant eyeball that everybody wants to talk about, right? It's attractions, right? We need to bring you to the city, and we're gonna give you all kinds of attractions you can't get anywhere else, right? And that it seems like that's Vegas's counter move to everybody else being able to bet from their own state now.
Even all those years in Reno, Reno is definitely an old school town, and the gambling and the casinos do not run that town. It's really more the cowboys and that kind of thing. And the casinos have to fight for everything they get. Not so much in Vegas, And I always told guys, we were trying to do this, trying to do that in Reno, and I said, guys, Vegas gets it done. They get it done. Somebody said something about Formula One. Oh, what happened? We're gonna have like the biggest race here. So we have hockey in the desert. Oh, and by the way, we won a Stanley Cup this last year. We went to the finals the first year. The Raiders. I've read. I can't quantify this, but I've read where Allegiant Stadium and all the things that they do at Allegiant Stadium, it's now in what, 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, it's the most profitable stadium in the United States, maybe the world. So Vegas does things right. That's just how it gets done, and I think we'll keep doing that. That's just we're constantly reinventing ourselves, and my biggest worry is running out of water. I don't think we're going to run out of money or ideas. That's going to keep going. The water's a different issue, but hopefully we got a good winter this year, and we'll be able to carry us through the next couple of years.
Can I talk to you about being an author? Because
Sure.
that's to me is always fascinating. The idea of putting all your thoughts in a book, and you've written different types of books. You've written about your life story. You've written some like fiction as well that maybe depicts on some things that you've seen loosely based. Those are two drastically different types of books. First of all, what made you decide I want to write a book? Did you have a fascination younger in writing? And then how do you come up with two completely different types of books? And I know you said you written a third one as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's talk about that. So first of all, when I was about was maybe ninth grade, something like that, I realized, what, I'm not going to be a pro ball player. My fastball at my peak, my absolute peak, may have been 70 miles an hour, maybe, probably more like 65. So I wasn't going to be a pitcher. I couldn't hit a curveball to save my life. So that was basketball. I'm like a 6-foot power forward. There's not a big call for those guys. Football, let's see, I had no speed, no strength, no agility. Probably not a big call for those guys. So I wanted to be a sports writer, though. I took a journalism class, and I've always been like a pretty good student, and I got the first D in my life. And I went and talked to the teacher, and I didn't realize till later on that she really had a thing against sports, and everything I was writing was about sports. She told me, you pretty much told me I wasn't a very good writer. Okay, well, okay, I became a bookmaker instead. But I always kind of had that burning in my mind, and I've always been like a pretty good storyteller. So I was going on Gil Alexander's show, and it started. Gil started calling it story time, and I would tell stories about old Vegas, and that started just we went out to dinner one night, and I was telling some stories. There's a bunch of guys because they're all younger than me and hadn't been. I mean, I got to Las Vegas in 1970. Well, 70 is when I started coming in. So they didn't know anything about the history. So I started telling the stories. Gil wanted me to do it on his show. It just became tremendously popular. And guys were telling me, you got to write this into a book. So I did write it into a book. And it sold really well. It's still selling. I still sell books. Yeah, I think, and it was one of those things too. I was writing occasional articles for the newspaper in Reno. And my good friend, his name is Burl Love, and he's a Greek guy. He was the editor up there, and he talked to me. He says, you've really kind of found your voice, and that really encouraged me. So I had written a novel, just one of those things I wrote back in about 2000, maybe started in 99, 98. And I kind of put it aside. And when Burl told me that, I went back. I said, well, I probably need to re-edit it. And I went back and looked, and I didn't need to re-edit it. I need to rewrite the whole thing. I mean, it was, it was terrible, to be honest with you.
Once you become a better writer, you look back at your old work. Really? I used to write like that?
Yeah, I know. I look back and said, oh my God, this is embarrassing. It's so bad. So I rewrote it. And I don't know if you've read it, George. It's Adel Fosmu, my brother. And it's, centered around gambling, of course, and a couple of Greek guys who fell on some hard times want their old buddy, whose son is a quarterback, to throw a football game for him. So, and I think, and I gave it to a lawyer to see if all my legal representations were right on. Yeah. A couple of Greek guys read it. I said, yeah, portraying our culture, not that much favorably, but in the right, truthfully. Yeah. They said, and I don't know if you've read it or not. I hope you have, but, so I'm very proud of that book. And that's one that, I'm, when I die, I hope that's my legacy for years to come, but I think they'll probably read the other books. But anyway, that one book that you're talking about is Then One Day, and that's all the stories. So anyway, my publisher wanted me to follow that book up. And I had plans. I says, well, let's do it in like a journalized form, and we'll go day by day, and we'll, interweave some stories, because when we get in the middle of summer, what's my journal going to say? Yeah, the Dodgers and Yankees won. We got our asses kicked. I mean, how interesting is that? I said, so we'll just weave some of the stories in and out. He says, that sounds great. Anyway, what year did I pick to do it? 2020, the year of COVID. So, even halfway through, I talked to him. I sent him all my work so far. I says, do I want to keep doing this? And he says, yeah, just keep writing. We'll figure it out at the end. So that's the book in the middle is Then One Year. And, it's weird because, I think my first book, Then One Day, that has a very broad appeal. Even my wife, one of her very, very good friends is an English woman, knows nothing about American sports. She loves the book, and she fell in love with my Uncle Jack. I think probably would have run away with him, but he's passed away now. But yeah, that had a broad appeal. The second book did not have that broad of appeal. But if you talk to like Roxy and Vic Salerno, they loved the book. They thought it was great, because they go through the day-to-day process of bookmaking and putting up the numbers. And this guy bet me this guy bet me that, and how did we survive during COVID, and all that stuff. So the guys in the business like that book, but it really doesn't have a strong appeal to anybody outside the business. And yeah, it's just I accept that. It is what it is. I think the work is good, but it's never going to sell like the first book, and hopefully my novel will outsell all of them. But I'm working on a fourth book right now. Then One Life, and I'm going to kind of recapsulize my life, and this will be a little more personal. George, I don't know if you know this, but between my wife and I, we've had some serious health issues. I'm going to go through that, but there's a lot of funny stories in there too. I don't want to make it sound like it's this downer of a book. And by the way, it's my wife had a brain tumor in 2007. She's doing fine, so she obviously survived that. Back in 2017, they gave me 2 years to live. Well, it's 6 years later, so I'm doing okay. So it's not a downer or anything like that. But I thought it was important to tell the story. I want to just kind of get that out there. If nothing else, maybe inspirational for some people to, if you are facing some health consequences, doctors are doing great stuff every day, and we'll, just try to live as long as we can. That's all. Someday something's going to get us, but try to extend that period as long as possible.
I wanted to tell you two things about Adel Fosmu. I have read it, and I do want to take you up on your offer that when I come to Vegas, I'd love for you to sign it. Whenever you read books about fiction, you understand that the story is not real, but you relate to it. There's parts of it that you pull out of it, and you're like, okay, there's a lot of overlap, and I've seen this situation. I've been in a situation like this as well. I want to ask you one last question because you've been such a gracious with your time. Like you've told me, like throughout everything you've done within the industry, and obviously we didn't get into everything, otherwise it would take too long. Outside of sports betting, what makes you happiest? Like what's your life where you say, this is for myself, it's time with friends and family, away from everything, where we're just enjoying each other's company and not even thinking about work and jobs and money like that. What to you is when you step outside, this is my happy zone in life?
I love fine dining. Like I mentioned with Frank Doty. That's one, but I like a lot of guys. But I like being with friends. We go out, my wife and I, maybe another couple or another few couples. We go out and have dinner together. I love fishing. I don't get to do it nearly as much as I would like to. I love fishing. But the other thing is I love cooking too, and sometimes I come home and, and I start cooking. My wife was like, "Boy, you had a long day of work. I hate to have you see you working like this." I enjoy it. Don't think that I'm suffering that I have to cook dinner for. No, I enjoy it. I like it's part of the creative process, I guess, and something that I enjoy doing. And then when it turns out good, the only bad part is sometimes my wife will say, you cook so good, I'm not sure I want to go to a restaurant tonight as well. Okay. And I almost George, and I know you're a fellow Greek. I almost never order lamb or lamb chops when I go out
No,
because
no.
I make it better myself. Why am
Yeah.
I going to pay somebody else to make it worse than me? So
100%. We whenever we go out with friends that aren't Greek, we don't want to go to a Greek restaurant. We like our Easters, and I told you how big my family is. There's 70 people. Everyone's pitching in all the great classic dishes, and the food is much better than you can get in a lot of restaurants. I want to go out for stuff that's not within my culture. But yeah, I think dinner, like eating over a meal with friends, I think that's like the love language of Greeks. That's where we're at our most peaceful.
some guys will ask me, "Where's the best Greek food in town?" I said, "Well, here's my
My house,
address.
yeah,
Let me
my
know when you're
house.
coming
That's
over."
always the answer. Yeah. Chris, I want to thank you, man. This was such a pleasure.
George, my pleasure too. And I know there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to, but if the time comes around, you want to do this again, I would be more than happy to.
That's it for me. Another edition of 90 Degrees is in the book. I want to thank my guest, Chris Andrews, Sportsbook Director at South Point, the sponsors of this podcast, Pinnacle and BetStamp, and my producer, Jason Cooper. Do me a favor before you go. I want you to like the content, subscribe, share, comment, engage with it. It really helps boost the viewership of the show, and it gives me more motivation to keep putting on great episodes. We'll be back next week with another great episode on 90 Degrees, where we take an inside look at the sports betting industry. That's it for me. Hope you enjoyed. Until next time.